There is one aspect of the Breaking Bad universe that is not touched upon very often in video analysis: the social commentary. Both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul manage to tell us so much about the changes in society in a subtle way that they can be considered like modern classics of the American literature. For this reason, I decided to make this series of videos titled Breaking Bad: An American Story. The first chapter, obviously, is about money. I'm just gonna start by stating the obvious: money is the foundation of capitalism and of American society. Everyone knows that, but I realized that many people from other countries struggle to understand the extent to which that statement goes when it comes to the US.
Cost of childbirth.
$100, $200?
Yeah. The average is about 10 grand, it can go up to 30,000. I wonder if you could tell me how expensive you think calling an ambulance out to your location is in America.
Is there a price for that?
Yes.
Jeez, $100? $200?
2.5 grand.
For what? Why? Why?
Money is literally a matter of life and death. You're getting charged for everything. Everyone is out to sell you something, and everything is considered fair game.
I know what you're thinking. Hey, a lawsuit sounds great. But Saul, who can I sue? Who can you sue? Try police departments, libraries, construction companies, school officials, cleaning services, financial institutions, local and international, your neighbors, your family members, your church, synagogue, or other religious institution, your employer, your employer's customers and suppliers, companies in other countries, companies that made the drugs that were turned into the drugs that you took. The possibilities are limitless.
In Europe, there are very strict boundaries that private companies have to respect, especially when it comes to essential services like healthcare, food, water, housing, or education. In the US, people need to be much more careful when planning their purchases and managing their savings, because the road to bankruptcy is way shorter. It's important to contextualize Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, since both shows reflect the socio-economic situation at the time when they were filmed, more than the one of the story. Breaking Bad started in 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis that led to the Great Recession, a crisis that uncovered the limits of the American dream, a dream that most people could not afford anymore, and the banks had been exploiting this with predatory tactics that ended up breaking the whole system. The White family is the perfect example of the middle-class family fallen from grace thanks to unforeseen circumstances. A firstborn son with a severe disability, a wife that gave up her job to take care of the child, a husband that has a respectable full-time job that is not enough to provide for his family anymore, and so he has to take on a second job at a car wash, an unexpected geriatric pregnancy that will bring the couple a second child, and, of course, the cancer diagnosis. Even a single event in this list can ruin a family budget in the US. The sum of all of them has clearly pushed the Whites towards poverty, and they managed to save the facade of middle class only thanks to money they don't actually have, like credit card payments. Walt's house represents the family's financial situation perfectly. At the first glance, it seems like a pretty nice detached property, with enough room for a family of 4, a small backyard with a pool for family gatherings, located in a nice suburban neighborhood. But if we look closely, the furniture is old. Walt and Skyler bought the place almost 20 years earlier, and clearly never got the money to either upgrade the furniture or even do the necessary maintenance work, like the infamous basement. The American dream Walt's generation was sold was very different from this reality. People used to buy a house, move forward with their careers, increasing their incomes progressively, and being able to afford more commodities. In the arc of 20 years, a family home would turn from an empty place to a much more refined accommodation, full of memories showing the growth of the family. The White's house feels empty, miserable. In 20 years, Walt's career has gone nowhere. The family struggles to make ends meet and lives paycheck to paycheck, while their debts grow. The middle-class lifestyle has become something out of reach for a man with a university degree working 2 jobs. Better Call Saul, on the other hand, even though it's set in the 2000s, is reflecting much more the 2010s. Jimmy McGill is much more similar to a millennial compared to Walt, even though the two are roughly the same age. Jimmy found his way in life later. Walt started his family with Skylar in his early 30s. By then, he already had experience as a chemist working with Elliot and Gretchen. Jimmy doesn't become a lawyer until he is in his late 30s, early 40s. This fact might seem irrelevant, but actually it makes a huge difference in the perspective of this character and influences his behavior. Jimmy sees people from the previous generation, like his brother Chuck, and what they achieved in life by the time they were his age, and the comparison as a negative influence. It fuels his tendency of cutting corners, because in his mind, he thinks he should be way ahead than he actually is. This is a common issue for millennials, who saw their parents starting a career straight after graduating and building a family by their early 30s. When things actually change, and a single degree is often not enough, so the studies might carry on for longer to reach a point where someone is employable. On the other hand, it's worth noting that after an initial period of struggle, which is normal, Jimmy actually managed to build a career for himself. And to be fair, the opportunity he got at Davis and Maine is something that would have set anyone else on the path of success. But even the way that things work out, Jimmy and Kim ended up making a good living between the two of them. Once Jimmy opened his firm and Kim joined Schweikart and Coughlin, they got to a place of absolute financial stability that could lead to a progressive growth. This is probably why the failure of these characters is harder than Walt's. They actually had a lot more and were in a much better position, but they didn't realize it, which is a core issue with younger generations.
You're a lawyer. You make good money, right?
Good days and bad, but yeah.
Legit money, on the level.
Yeah, so?
Your wife's a lawyer? A legit lawyer?
Yeah.
Why you do all this?
I said money is the foundation of capitalism, and it's an essential factor to be considered in people's lives. But it's worth noting that everyone has a different relationship with money and gives money a different value. The US are still in a way a land of opportunities. If you're willing to work hard, there is always a way to make some money. Some unexpected events can lead you to bankruptcy, but in general you are not risking starving like in other countries. This is extremely important to consider if we want to understand what money actually means to characters that are apparently desperate, like Walt or Jimmy at the beginning of their respective stories. Walt has to make a tough decision when it comes to paying for his cancer treatment or leaving money to his family after his death. True. It is also true that the problem is solved pretty quickly when Elliot offers him a good paying job and benefits that would cover his medical bills. Walt's miserable financial situation is all his own fault, and he uses the need for money as an excuse to get what he actually wants, which is power and admiration. Jimmy's financial struggles are very short, and considering he doesn't have a family to provide for, they are also easier to overcome. Making money to Jimmy was never about money itself. At first, it was a way to get his brother's respect. Then, it became part of his coping mechanism. Money as a way to fill the void left by Chuck after his death, and then by Kim. And the fact that not even money can fill that void is a core element in the tragedy of Jimmy McGill. American culture is founded on this belief that money is the solution to all problems. For the capitalist machine's engines to run efficiently, it's crucial that people's desire for money is always kept alive. Jesse and Nacho are the best examples of two characters that grew up with this idea of money as a problem solver. Ironically, they both chose the streets and what they thought was the easy road to wealth, even though they had a chance to live an honest life thanks to their parents. Jesse and Nacho find out the hard way that money doesn't buy happiness, which is not just an old trope, it's an actual fact that everyone who has money is well aware of. Take the wealthiest characters in the Breaking Bad universe. Gus sees money only as a means to an end. Getting his revenge on the cartel is his only real objective. And to reach that goal, he had to gain their trust and the position of power in the criminal organization. Gus is the best example of how really successful people who had a good education tend to keep a low profile and don't need to show off their wealth, because they don't need to be admired or validated by others. The money they got is just the byproduct of their hard work, a thing that we can observe in Chuck as well. A man who got to the top of a prestigious law firm, which means he is probably a millionaire, and still lives a pretty normal upper middle class life. Howard, on the other hand, seems to enjoy his money a bit more, but it is also important to notice that he is the face of the company, so driving an expensive car, wearing expensive suits, and going to luxurious restaurants is part of his job. He has to represent HHM as a successful company 24/7. On the other hand, Howard clearly shows he spends a considerable amount of his income helping people less fortunate, like sponsoring Kim's studies at law school. The Breaking Bad universe is particularly effective in showing how money itself changes in our current society. This is something that will hit differently depending from what country you're from. But the dollar has always been a core element in American culture. Other countries, like the UK, have switched to mostly cashless a long time ago. But the US, partly thanks to its tipping culture, has always kept a much more solid relationship with cash. The idea that piling up single-dollar bills you can make a solid amount over time is deeply rooted in American culture, from kids getting a few bucks to shovel snow in the winter, to the waiter counting the tips at the end of the day. Dollar bills and coins add a material and symbolic value. If we pay attention watching Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, cash is always related to illegal activities, in contrast with legal ones that switch to bank transactions. The disappearance of money from the legal transactions is due mostly to the need of monitoring people's incomes for tax purposes, a contradiction when it comes to the American culture of freedom and low government control. The paradox of money and the American way leaving the legal sphere to find a new home in the criminal world is extremely fascinating. Money for people living an honest life is illusory and often non-existent. On the other hand, crime pays cash and everyone gets their fair share. This is probably the hardest part to digest, but the criminal economy is still solid. Criminals make a product that is always in high demand. They run the whole production and distribution and cash in, plain and simple. Legal businesses, on the other hand, are vastly producing goods and services with money they don't have, through funders, taking loans and maxing out credit cards, hoping to get a return good enough to keep the ball rolling. A criminal enterprise can open a vault and show you exactly how much money it is built upon, considering how much the American economy has shifted from research-based into money-based, where money is just an abstract concept that can be manipulated to benefit one or the other. I wouldn't be surprised if one day someone opened the Federal Reserve vault and found it empty.